She named him Prey. But he made hunters his victims. They painted a stripe of ash across Cade Mercer's cheekbones and called it mercy. Beyond the bone gates, the killing ground steamed under a red dawn, the jungle of Kesh waking with chittering flutes and the wet breath of vines. On the high terrace above him, the hunt mistress lifted a hand for silence. Her armor caught the light like a coiled storm. "Run, human," she said, voice smooth as oiled metal. "You have one bell to prove your species' stories are more than noise. I name you Prey." The horn cracked the air. Cade ran because he had to, but he smiled because she had said stories. He knew stories. He slid into the jungle's shade and became small, a shadow among trunks lacquered with moss, footsteps softened by leaf rot, breath measured. His fingers found a downed branch, flexing it. Not a weapon. Lever. He took a length of creeper and twisted until it squealed and held. He'd once taught survival to people who thought shelter meant a roof. He'd learned to love the way problems turned into handles if you looked at them sideways. He paused by a pool where dragonflies hung like broken jewels. He cupped water, rubbed mud into his neck and hair to smother scent, pocketed a fistful of crushed bitter leaves. Above, a scissorbird flashed between fronds, the same species he'd seen tethered on the terraces as a signal. Useful. A hiss. Cade froze. A shimmer in the ferns resolved into a hunter. Lean, masked, a tri-pointed spear like a thorn. The hunter's partner kept to the right, using a tree for cover. Flankers. They moved with the patience of rain. Their armor whispered. Cade stepped back, careful, then snapped the lever upward. The deadfall he'd propped minutes earlier thunked down, not on the hunters but onto a decaying log. It burst with powder-fine spores, a pale coughing fog that blinded the pair. Cade arrowed forward, jammed a heel into the closer hunter's knee, knocked the spear aside, and tugged free the man's sling of bone whistles and a loop of cord. He didn't celebrate. He ran. By the time the fog thinned, he'd set 2 more gifts. A trip of vine over a root, a stone balanced so lightly a whisper could topple it. When the second pair followed the first, the forest sang with a cascade of little mistakes. Cade vaulted a stream bed and found sanctuary under a fallen giant whose roots arched like a cathedral. There he breathed and stitched a plan from what he had. On the terrace, the hunt mistress watched through a scry lens that stitched distant images into her right eye. Shira Vel, daughter of the Teal House, whose ancestors had hunted sky leviathans and threaded their bones into palaces. She had named many prey and raised her knife over all of them. But this human did not thrash. He wrote himself into the understory. Interesting. Close the ring, she told her outriders. Press him uphill. I want the chase. Cade heard the shift in bird calls and knew the net was tightening. He climbed as she wanted, but never in straight lines. He seeded the slope with lies. The 3 bone whistles, tuned to different pitches. He bound to trembling saplings with spider silk and set them to sing when the breeze shifted. Hunters stalk sounds that moved. His sounds moved. He moved elsewhere. Midway up he found the cages. They were decorative cruelty. Woven vine domes hung from bronze hooks, each holding a captured creature too exhausted to protest. A dust-furred lizard with a bruised eye. A child of a thin, willow-pale, wrists bound. She lifted her head when Cade stepped into light, eyes glass green and blank with fear. Quiet, he whispered. He tested the latch with his stolen cord and a hook scavenged from the sling. Pop. Phil flinched, then blinked again and stood as if remembering how. Her fingers fluttered apology signals. Cade pressed the bone whistles into her hand, pointed downhill, mimed tying them to branches. Wind, he said softly. Song. Confuse. She stared another heartbeat. Then she flashed a small, fierce grin and vanished like a ripple through reeds. Cade freed the lizard and the 2 other cages. He took their cords, left their doors yawning. Messages. He climbed on. The ridge was an obsidian spine. Beyond it, the jungle fell into a basin shaped like a bowl that had once held fire. In the bowl's lip stood a ruin. Colonnades of ribbed stone, gutters cut to catch rain and feed a cistern below. Cade studied the channels. The old engineers had loved gravity. So did he. Bootsteps ghosted the ridge. Hunters fanned silhouettes like serrated leaves. They let him see them. That was the point. Make the prey sprint into the bowl, then harvest him where the ground offered no cover. Cade stepped into the bowl. He walked openly to the colonnade and set his hands to the carved gutter. It was jammed with years of grit and leaf mold. He pried with the bone hook, then with the lever, and the blockage sighed. Water began to thread faster. He moved to the second channel and did the same, counting under his breath. The basin would want to empty itself if given permission in 2 places. He gave it 3. Shira Vel descended like a verdict, helmet tucked beneath her arm. The hunters formed a crescent. They carried no guns. This was ceremony, not war. "Why did you free the Suf?" she asked, curious as a cat. "They cut our nets and take our eggs." "Because cages rot the hunter worse than the hunted," Cade said and straightened. She laughed. "Fine. Have a dramatic end, human." The hunters surged. Cade blew a whistle, low, thin. From the bowl's rim, 3 answering notes rose as the wind found the Isof's lures. The crescent faltered a fraction of a step. Cade touched the lever to the last clogged mouth and shoved. Plug broke. Water leapt. The basin woke. Channels took the surge and multiplied it. The gutters groaned and spat. A sheet of water slammed across the obsidian with the weight of a falling wall, not deep enough to drown a standing hunter but deep enough to steal feet, to turn ground into a tumble of slick stones. Cade moved where he had memorized purchase. Hunters flailed, slid, collided. He didn't strike to kill. He struck to make their balance worse, to remind gravity whose side it favored. Shira planted her stance against the rush and grinned as if someone had finally brought her a song she liked. She lunged, a dance of knife and knee and elbow. Cade met her with the lever and empty hands, redirecting, not resisting. Twice she nearly opened him. Twice he stole her line and gave it to the water. When the surge thinned, she came again. No grin now, all intent. Cade let her take him to the very lip of the cistern. Her blade kissed his rib. He saw the shape of the next cut, the end of his stories, and chose a different one. He dropped the lever and seized her wrist with both hands, not to throw her but to pull her as the cracked stone under their feet collapsed. They fell together, smashing into the cistern's cold throat. They sank. The world narrowed to pressure and the gallop of his heart. He found her shoulder, shoved, found the wall with his boots and climbed. They broke surface coughing. He hooked his arm through a vine root and hauled them both out. He lay on the stone, breath shredding, and looked at the woman who had named him prey. She stared back, dripping, eyes wide with something that wasn't victory. "You could have let me go," she said. "You could have left me caged," he answered. On the terrace, the remaining hunters had formed a ring, uncertain. Cade stood shakily and snatched the hunt mistress's fallen torque from the whetstone, a band of carved bone set with her house's teal. He lifted it high. "I claim guest right by the old river law," he called, gambling that the jungle's engineers had been theirs once, and that law clung like lichen. Life returned for life returned. There was a murmur, And then a stillness that felt like a door stopping before it struck your face. An elder among the hunters tilted her chin. "Granted," she said, reluctant but bound. "For the span of 3 bells. No blood taken." Shiravel looked at her knife and slid it home. "You turned my ground against me," she said, half admiration, half hunger for a rematch. "I turned your cages against themselves," Cade said. "You catch things until you forget the world is mostly what slips through. Stop hunting persons. Hunt storms if you must." She snorted. "You think a single clever morning will change a house?" "No," Cade said. He felt the weight of the torque, heavy as a promise, and pushed it back into her hands. "But it might change you." The horn on the terrace sounded again. This time not a crack but a long, low note. The ring of hunters stepped back. The jungle breathed, aware of new lines drawn if only for a while. Shiravel held his eyes a heartbeat longer, then inclined her head, the smallest bow a proud house could give. "Story," she allowed. Cade smiled and walked out of the bowl, alive, the mud drying into maps upon his skin. Behind him, old water whispered through freed channels, and birds tested new songs on the wind.